This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoak and Grayson Grundhoefer.
And good afternoon. Welcome into a brand new edition of the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com. Also, Baylor Athletics on Sikkim365, the YouTube channel that hopefully some of you are watching us on today. And if you are, welcome. And if you are, then if you haven't already, please hit subscribe and please hit the like button as well. We would certainly appreciate that. I am Craig Smoak, joined as always, as I am every single week, pretty much almost nearly every week of the year, almost all 52. And last year, I think it was basically all 52 or 51 of 52. But joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer of Sikkim365.com. Also got Garrett Ross behind the scenes, Jack McKenzie as well. Hope you're having a good day as well. We get set to talk about a few different things surrounding Baylor athletics this week, from basketball to a little bit of football, some softball as well after a huge week for Glenn Moore and his team, and just some other sporadic notes that we will get to. But Grayson, how you doing this week, man?
I'm doing good. I mean, it's always a nice week when Baylor sweeps Texas in something. So that happened this weekend, which was fun, which I know we'll talk about. Recruiting, kind of figuring out the lay of the land a little bit as Baylor tries to round out their roster. And then, of course, official visits coming up in June. So I feel like a lot to talk about, even though it is kind of starting to get to that point where everything's starting to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, definitely getting to that point in kind of rounding up results and stuff. Couple teams, tennis on the men's and women's side, are now done. I know there's like individuals or men's tennis has, a couple doubles guys that are going to move on, but the teams themselves now out of postseason play. So there's two more that are done. We just had acro and tumbling wrap up recently with another national title. Congrats to them. But yeah, you're starting to get down to kind of the final handful of sports remaining this semester with, I guess, about a month or so here still left to go. Not sure exactly on the end date for every schedule, but about a month, because here we are in the first week or second week now of May. So with all that being said, what is remaining and what is still going on? Well, a few different things. And let's go ahead and start off in men's basketball, where a couple of one roster note and one ranking note, but I guess the big news over these past few days for Scott Drew and company is the fact that one of the burning roster questions for next year, how are they going to replace all of these guys who have declared for the draft, who have already announced their transfers. Certainly some of them could still return. We know that, but they've got holes that they need to fill. And now we've learned that one of those will come via a new signee, or somebody who's been committed now for a while but is now officially signed and will be arriving a year early, and that is Yves Missy, as he will be joining the 2024 class, or is it the 23 class rather than the 24 class as he was originally scheduled. So he will be on the team and playing Big 12 ball and all that good stuff starting next season. So arriving a year early. Grayson, what does this mean, getting Yves Missy in sooner rather than later? And how does he contribute, along with a couple of other new faces that they'll be bringing in, and probably some others as well through the transfer portal eventually? But what was already a pretty good class on paper with a couple of high-profile guys now adds a third as well.
Right. So I guess let's just start with him first, then we'll kind of dive into what's going on with these decisions and kind of where they're at with the transfer portal. But Yves Missy, 7-footer, a guy with a great wingspan. He comes in, and I think it was kind of already a foregone conclusion, right? Because Ashley Hodge had mentioned it a ton on the premium side. We've mentioned it some, that this looked like something that was definitely going to happen. So now he's reclassifying to the 2023 class. And it's key for this team because last year they really struggled down low. And really it was more than just scoring from the big man position. It was the defense, the rim protection, the physicality. They just were lacking it all last year, which is something we really haven't seen from a Scott Drew-led team ever, to be honest. And so you bring him in. Now you have him, you got Josh O, and you got Everyday John. Those are going to be your 3 quote-unquote centers next year. I think 2 of them will probably get the lion's share of playing time. At this time, I expect that to be Everyday John and Yves Missy. But I do think in general they're in a much better place than they were a season ago with their post play. And I think Yves Missy just gives them another level of athleticism, skill. He's a potential pro prospect. He was a top 20 guy when he moved from the 2024 class. And so in the 2023 class, he's number 35 in the country, according to Composite. But he's a guy who I do think brings a lot to the table. And so this is huge for them depth-wise, size-wise, and athletically as they really try to figure out how they're going to kind of adapt with their big men in this kind of era where they're becoming more of a guard-oriented scoring team. So trying to figure out the perfect big man, I think is something that we saw with Everyday John. He was kind of perfect when he was healthy, but I think they're really trying to get more athletic and have more size down there and just be more of an attacking offense with their big men.
So he's 6'10", a little over 200 pounds, and they'll certainly, shape him up and get him exactly where they want him to be over these next few months prior to the season. But, yeah, now some help down low, to be sure. So Yves Missy coming out of prolific prep out in California, his latest stop, 6'10", 210. He's listed, and he's now a member of the 2023 Baylor recruiting class and signing class, and he is not alone, as you've got the transfer in Jaden Nunn that we learned about last couple of weeks or so. You knew that was coming through the transfer portal as he made the move over from VCU, so you addressed your guards, with Nunn's addition. Now go down low with Yves Missy. And then, Missy himself is joined by 2 fellow 2023 signees that have been in the mix, in the chamber, so to speak, for a while now, as Miro Little, of course, is on his way as well, and Jacoby Walter, who supplies you with the shooting guard. Little listed as a point guard, Nunn a point guard. I know you can kind of shake it up and rearrange, but just on paper, that's the foursome that they're getting ready and set to bring in next year. And, of course, as we've mentioned now a couple times, there's going to be others as well that join them in some form or fashion. But it's a good little group that you're going to be seeing a lot of next season. And Jacoby Walter, in fact, now a top 10 player in the entire country, a 5-star rated in the latest update, and that's by 247. He was a 5-star, and just has he been checked on others as well, or
it's the composite. So it's how it all kind of comes together. He's
averaged out.
Yeah, if you average it all out, he's the number 9 player in the country right now, according to the composite ranking, and he's a guy who I expect fully to be their starting. A starting small forward type for them, because kind of how I view it is I think Jaden Nunn, Jacoby Walter are going to be 2 starters for this team next year. Then if you're able to bring back Adam Flagler or a transfer, they'll start at point guard. And then Jalen Bridges or a transfer will start at the 4. And then it's just kind of about, are you going to start Everyday John or Yves Missy as your starting center? I think that's probably to be determined. I'd probably lean towards Everyday John right now. But yeah, that's kind of where they're at. So they're still trying to figure out who are going to be the starters for this team, because right now Adam Flagler and Jalen Bridges are still going through the draft process. We won't know what they're going to do until the end of the month. On the flip side, Baylor's still recruiting guys in the portal and trying to figure out, okay, so if Bridges and Flagler leave, or if they're leaning towards leaving, how do we make sure that we're in the best position to be successful next season? And in order to do that, they're going to have to hit the transfer portal. So right now, kind of a waiting game. But again, something that I mentioned this week, Flagler and Bridges, yes, they're at the, they're going through the NBA draft process, but so are a lot of college prospects right now. And so as those guys start to make decisions on whether they're going to stay in the draft or not, you're going to have guys who end up making that decision to not go in the draft and then also make the decision to enter the transfer portal. And so that's going to be something very interesting to monitor, and a big reason why I don't think Baylor is under an immense amount of pressure, at least not yet, to fill those spots that could be potentially empty following the decisions from Flagler and Bridges. But right now, I still feel about I think there's about a 50-50 chance that both of them come back. I think there's about an 80% chance that at least one of them comes back.
So there you go. Jacoby Walter, now a 5-star. Yves Missy now on his way in a year early. And Miro Little, Jaden Nunn, also part of the group, that foursome that will be making their way to Waco in a short amount of time to get ready for the 2023 season. And yes, more will be on their way at some point in time, and more could be on their way out. We don't know yet, as you mentioned, kind of in purgatory as far as just don't quite know yet on a couple of names on and what they'll do. So we wait patiently for that. But in the meantime, good to know that there are some answers being answered, some questions being answered with the reclassification, even if we knew that was coming, and getting that even fresher, updated ranking for Jacoby Walter. Those 5-stars sure do look nice on your recruiting class. So a good deal there for Scott Drew and Baylor men's basketball. And then I guess one note I wanted to touch on, because we've got a few different kind of football things to talk about, but a former Bear, and I wanted your thoughts because I know you're a big fan of the young man, but Jalen Ellis, former Baylor wide receiver. He was a great story a few years back. He was a member of the Cedar Ridge high school football team down near Austin and Round Rock, of course, and Sean Bell was his head coach for a year, and they developed a great relationship, and Sean Bell came to Baylor to join Matt Rule's staff after a really successful 1 year at Cedar Ridge, and just decided like he wanted to get into the college game and really come help out his alma mater in a time of need. And he did that and, maintained that relationship with Jalen Ellis, who became and continued to grow into, because when Sean Bell left, people were like, well, who's he leaving behind? Jalen Ellis is one of those guys. But then over the course of that following year, Jalen Ellis grew into a bigger recruit and had Michigan and Texas and all these other schools coming after him, committed to Baylor early on, and that was in large part due to Sean Bell and his relationships, and stayed committed despite all of the overtures and visits and all the other things that took place. He got to Waco, didn't have a banner career like we all would have hoped, caught basically what averaged out to be like a couple balls per year over the course of 3 years, and decided to enter the transfer portal. And that wasn't a surprise. It was, I guess, more of a surprise of just how long it took, because it was kind of a foregone conclusion that was probably going to be the case. But you never know. And so when there was no word, you thought, well, maybe he's going to stick around or what? And then was not a part of spring ball, and it was like, okay, writing's on the wall. But he was in the portal, and just about a week ago, finally announced his destination. And it was great because, he was going to be somebody we were going to see, although great, maybe not the right word, because if he had caught like 4 long balls for touchdowns against Baylor, that would have been kind of hard to deal with. But regardless, they're not going to face him unless it's in a playoff setting or a bowl setting, because he's not going to go to West Virginia any longer. He's not going to be in the Big 12, Grayson. He popped up with a graphic just a day or two ago, and he's decommitted from West Virginia. And he is going to go play for Deion Sanders at Colorado as they overhaul their roster of 50-plus names, and he's now one of them. So guys from Florida State have been all the flavor for Colorado in some ways, but, they're going to have to pick from all over, and they've now picked the pocket of Neil Brown in West Virginia, it appears. So what are your thoughts on Jalen Ellis going to Colorado?
It was really tough to see kind of what happened to him at Baylor. He got injured in the All-American game right before he got to Baylor in January, tore his ACL, and so he gets to Baylor and he's already hurt. And I don't think he ever fully got back to kind of where he was coming into Baylor. Again, everything you saw in high school was pretty much what he was at Baylor and what he's probably going to be at Colorado, which is a deep threat, which with not a huge route tree. Just more of a guy that goes deep. You're able to find him deep, and he can make some explosive plays. And honestly, we saw it last year. I mean, last season, the guy only had 3 catches, but he had over 150 yards receiving. I mean, he was averaging over 50 yards a catch this year for Baylor. We saw the touchdown against Texas. Could have been another one in that game as well. But it's pretty crazy to look at his numbers and you go, okay, the guy has 6 career receptions and 4 of them are for 39 yards or more. So he's been a big play guy, and that's pretty much it. That's one trick pony, hasn't played a lot, and it's been hard to watch. But on the flip side, maybe he goes to Colorado and they can actually, find a role for him in that, find that niche for him. And I could see that, but I'm not sitting here saying he's going to go for, 1,000 yards. That's not going to happen. But I do think there could be a situation where he maybe outperforms what R.J. Sneed did there this past year, which would not be very crazy to imagine.
No, I think R.J. is a great dude, but yeah, he didn't go and flourish there.
No. Bad situation as well.
Yeah, he also wasn't playing for Dion either, so he was playing for like the bad version of Colorado, and I don't know what the Dion version will be, but it'll have to be better than what we just saw, and that's unfortunately what R.J. joined up with was a staff on its way out. So, and it's just not a very good team in general. Clearly, that's why they made the coaching change. But, yeah, I think Jalen could very well be a guy who pops up with a 50-yard touchdown, on occasion, or maybe they find a way to get him, more involved than he ever was at Baylor and he can be healthy. But, yeah, just interesting that, he was going to be playing for West Virginia, it looked like, and Baylor could run into him, but now that's not going to be the case. So good luck to him. I do think, and I don't mean this disrespectfully towards him, but I made this comment on the show yesterday. It does, I think, kind of alert people to like what exactly is going on at Colorado. Like maybe it makes you look a little bit differently because when you hear, like, how it is, Baylor could have a very productive player, but if he enters the transfer portal and they get somebody new, it's like, oh, great, new. Like, everybody just wants new. It doesn't even, you're not like, get out of here, bring in the new transfers, like, we just want to turn the page. And so people at Colorado, like there is with the coaching change, is like, new, all this new stuff, new players, bring more new. And every one of them celebrated as though they're like this huge addition. And so as they're adding all these guys, it just makes me wonder when there's like this big reaction to Jalen Ellis of how many other people around the country during this time are going like, it gives you a different perspective on who all they're bringing in.
For sure.
Because it's not like some huge splash after huge splash after huge splash, even though it kind of feels that way because it's just constantly happening. And you're like, oh, Dion's got another one. And then I'm sitting there going, but like the dude caught like 3 balls in 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see, point being, of like when you kind of really know the guys they're bringing on, it gives you a different look than when you're just like, holy cow, they're bringing on like all these dudes from all over. So I'm very curious when you've got a melting pot like that and just a few months of time to get it all the ingredients. I'm very interested in what comes out on the other end of the recipe for them in this first year because it's a lot of just grabbing from every shelf and just putting it in a pot and hoping it all comes together, and that'll be a fascinating experiment to say the least. That's why it's been so widely talked about.
For sure, and I mean, Jalen Ellis is going to have way more fun in Colorado than he would have at West Virginia.
Oh, for sure.
Let's be real. I think that's a great decision by him. He's, his final year in college, he gets to go play for Dion in his first year at Colorado. That's going to be a lot of fun, regardless if they're good or not. I don't necessarily think that matters too much. But yeah, it is interesting, like you said, because it's not like they're bringing in guys who are, first round draft picks every time they're adding a guy. There are some guys that they've added that are very talented, but then there's others that's just like, hey, we're trying to fill spots because we've lost like 60 guys from this roster. But yeah, I mean, I even saw a graphic that Shedeur Sanders is like a top 8 quarterback in the country. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying that. I know he was good at Jackson State, but like, come on now. We're playing a very different ball game here at the Power 5 level. And so to have him inside that top 10, I think is a little extreme given we haven't seen him play against the competition he's about to face. But
is he really being listed as a top 10 quarterback in college football next year?
Yeah, it's crazy.
He's not even top 5 in the Pac-12, I don't think. Like,
probably not.
Is he? I mean, maybe if he is, he's number 5.
Penix, Caleb Williams, Jaden Delora, I think is better at Arizona. Bo Nix, and then
Cam Rising.
That's a big stretch to have him inside the top 10 in the country. And you're exactly right. I mean, is he even in the top half
Yeah.
of the Pac-12. Whew.
I mean, I don't know, but that's going to be a fascinating spot for Jalen Ellis. So good for him. But I think the reason I thought about the reaction to it was more because of the West Virginia reaction initially. They were like, Jalen Ellis is coming to West Virginia. What do you guys think? And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I mean, if he works out, that's great. But, like, I kind of dampened the excitement a little bit.
Hey, man, that one catch for 3 yards that Jalen Ellis had against West Virginia back in 2021 is really what was selling it for him. I mean, they've gotten to see Baylor play them all this time and didn't see him have one play. And then it's a little crazy to me. I think Jalen.
I think it's the transfer thing. Like I said, everybody just loves having the transfers coming in. It's the new faces and the new names and all that. So I think that's a big part of it. But you will not see Jalen Ellis playing Baylor in the season finale. That we do know. Good luck to him at Colorado. Hopefully he has a big year there. But that does play into looking at next season. I don't think him being on the Mountaineers roster one way or the other affects what you were going to pick as far as a win or a loss goes for that final game of the regular season. But it is approaching summertime, and Vegas is getting all of their odds in a row. So everybody who chooses to do so can, no student athletes, though. Please, no student athletes. Go place their bets on what they expect next season. And so we've got some win totals that have come out over these last few days in regards to next year's Big 12 season. And really interesting to see these coming from DraftKings. And there will be the Caesars we could probably do one of these every week, these win total segments, because everybody's going to be breaking theirs out. But DraftKings did release theirs, and it was something, nice and fun for folks to chew on. In terms of looking at next year. And at the very top of the list, you've got Texas at 9.5 wins, Oklahoma at 9.5 wins. And I will say this on Oklahoma, because I am, somebody who follows them very closely. Initially, I saw that and I completely balked. I was like, what the are you talking about? 9.5 wins after what we saw last year. But their schedule is so incredibly weak that, when we weren't doing official win totals. We were just glossing over them and just giving our knee-jerk thoughts. We weren't looking at the schedules while we were doing it. So I was initially I was no chance in, that they're going to win 9.5 games. And then I looked at their schedule and I was like, well, at least I can see it now. I couldn't see it before, just thinking they're playing the typical old schedule. But then I looked at who they're actually playing. I'm like, well, if they are a little bit better, I could see how they could actually get to 9.5 wins, because they're going to be more talented than everybody but Texas on their schedule. They don't have a big non-con game either.
It's nice to not have Georgia on the schedule, which they were supposed to have Georgia.
Well, that's Texas, right? We're supposed to have Georgia or Oklahoma?
No.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because the
supposed
SEC
to have
thing.
Georgia for this year.
Yeah, so they don't have that. And so, looking at the schedule, at least I can kind of see that now. So anyways, they're at 9.5. But let's get to Baylor, who is at 5th. Here, and really tied for 3rd, because you've got Oklahoma and Texas both at 9.5 win total. Kansas State coming off the championship last year at 8.5, and then a cluster of teams at 7.5 wins, and that includes Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. So your thoughts on Baylor at 7.5 wins from DraftKings looking at next year?
UCF is at 7.5 too, right? Aren't they?
They're listed at 6.5 on this list that I've got.
6.5 on that one. Okay, so I guess so. They're tied for 4th then, because
they're tied for 3rd. You got Texas, Oklahoma at 9.5, K-State at 8.5,
4th, right?
And then Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor.
Right. So because there's 3 teams ahead of them, so they'd be right 4th. So 4th on
tied
the list.
Tied for 3rd place. Let's do that.
Okay, so
as far as the win totals go, there's 2 teams at 9.5. There's 2nd place at 8.5, and then there's Baylor and 2 others at 3rd at 7.5.
So they're in the next tier of teams.
They're in the 3rd tier. Yes. Yeah. There we go.
So I think when I look at this, I go, okay, so Baylor in my eyes, I do believe is probably closer to an 8-win team. I'm leaning towards the over on this. I think their schedule sets up really well. We've talked about that, 8 home games. They're non-con. I know they have to play Utah. I understand that's a tough game, but the other 2 games are gimmies, in my opinion, versus Texas State and I guess, was it Long Island? I think they're going to be fine in those games. So, I'm leaning towards the over there. But, some of the other ones I found interesting. I just think in general, that tier that we're talking about right there, Texas Tech, Kansas State I know is 1 up, but K-State at 8.5. Like, I think those 4 teams, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, K-State, like, I could easily see the Big 12 champion coming from that group. I actually almost expect the Big 12 champion to come from that group. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. I think Texas and OU makes sense being at the top, especially Texas, because I think talent-wise, they're probably the best team. But then on the flip side, like 9.5 wins when one of your games is at Alabama, that's really hard for me to get on board with. I think they're more like a 9-3 team. I think OU is probably more like a 9-3 team, but their schedule, maybe they find a way to get to 10 wins. So that was kind of my initial thoughts on that top group of teams. The lower group, it was kind of more of just like a cluster of teams that I'm not sure what to do with. But Kansas is the team that kind of stuck out to me as, oh, you know what? I think they're going to hit the over on that. I think they'll win 7 games. I think last year they were plagued by injury quite a bit. They get Jalen Daniels back. I believe in their coach, Lance Leipold. And so I do believe they're going to be probably a 7-win team next year, which would hit the over as well. And I know a lot of people have been looking at Iowa State and Cincinnati specifically as 2 other teams that, hey, they could easily hit the over. They have a history of having more success than their current number is at. But yeah, those were another 2 that I was kind of fascinated to look at.
I mean, I think they pegged it right on. I haven't, dove in deep on a lot of the others just yet. And, having the schedule does matter quite a bit because, you can go off and, like I said, Oklahoma on paper, they're like 9.5 wins. Get the heck out of here. But look at that schedule and tell me that there's not a path to 9.5 wins. There is. I still think under for them, but I know others will disagree there. But I can at least see it. Like I said, Cincinnati, that's going to be really interesting for them. But I think they pegged Baylor perfectly. I think based on the schedule, they should be 8-4. Based on that schedule and all those home games, 8-4 is what I would look at as like where I would probably top out and feel comfortable, because I don't feel comfortable making this a 9-win team right now. I just don't. I don't trust the defense. I don't trust the quarterback play yet. I need to see something of substance, but that's right. I mean, that's if you want to get people to bet, 7.5, man, is a perfect number for them because, again, I could see it through the schedule, 8 wins, and I could very easily see them winning 7 games and falling right under that based on the same exact schedule, because a lot of it's going to depend, like that first big, non-con game with Utah. And you got like Texas early on, and you've got some road games like UCF and Cincinnati where you're like, well, those teams shouldn't be, I think, walking right into the Big 12 and beating you, but it's at their place, and you have no idea what Baylor even looks like, much less those teams. I don't have like high hopes for Cincinnati this year with the coaching change and just all of that, but you never know. I mean, when you're playing at their place and you've never really, gone there very often, for everybody heading to these new places, that's going to be unique and a little bit of a wrinkle that no one's really used to. So I don't know how that plays havoc, or if it even plays any havoc on some of these schedules, but 7.5, you can chime in on what you think as far as Baylor goes, but that is the DraftKings win total number for them for 2023.
Yeah, and I was honestly a little surprised by that. I thought it was going to be 6.5. That was kind of my initial.
I think that would have been too easy. I think, like I said, I think 7.5 is perfect.
Well, do you remember? So before 2021, it was 5.5, and I was like, oh my goodness, they were hitting the over on this, and that was coming off of the 2-win 2020 COVID season. And I was like, they're easily going to get to a bowl game, and then of course they had an amazing year, but. I thought this number was going to be more like 6.5, especially after the year they were just coming from. And it just shows, Vegas is smart, and Vegas caught up on this number a little bit. But I also think that should be encouraging for Baylor fans to sit there and go, oh, like Baylor didn't have a good year last year, yet Vegas is expecting them to take a step forward. Just something to look at. Whereas, other schools like Tech, who have all this momentum that everyone's talking about, well, they won 8 games last year, right? And so they're expected to win less than that this year. I just, that tells you also kind of where, maybe that momentum is not quite, right. And
or maybe
TCU,
they just don't expect them to win close games like Oklahoma and Texas like they did last year. Those types of affairs, they play Oregon early on. So, yeah, I mean, it really does help to look at the schedule, and you get a much clearer perspective on where they're coming from. And that's why I think, looking at Baylor, you could very easily see 8 or 9 wins if the schedule plays out the way that you think it should. At the same time, you have a couple of those coin flip games, and you're like, all right, they're 7-5 very easily if you're not careful. So, yeah, but you're right on Texas Tech. Maybe, what would you had them, like 8.5 or something?
I personally would have had them at 7.5, but I feel like everyone in the country, the way they're pumping this team up, it feels like they should be at like 9 wins as their over/under win total. It's just like,
what's one of the most important factors in college sports these days? Having an old team. They got an old team. They have an old team, and that's why that they are, along with the juice that Joey has, and their recruiting classes are, the best that they've been in a while, and they're setting up to be, like, on average, probably the best that they've had in quite some time. And now that I'm playing to this year right away necessarily, but they're bringing in new guys. There's excitement, and I mean, I hear what you're saying though. You would think that they'd have them up a little higher rather than with Baylor and a rebuilding or reloading TCU roster,
is the TCU one's also fascinating because that just shows you the Big 12 in general. Just like, hey man, you can have a great year the year before, but that doesn't mean you're just going to turn around and run through the conference, especially when your schedule turns over and they have to play the
they
5
also
road games.
Won so many close games last year. I mean, they could very well have had about 4 losses before they even got to the championship game, and they just
including one here.
Well, that one, the worst one of all of them, actually. That one just almost 2 seconds away, and that game's a totally different result, and the whole college football season's different as a result of that. So, I don't know. I haven't looked all the way through Tech's schedule just yet. Like, I don't have it committed to memory outside of that Oregon game early on. But, they've got some juice around them. Could have probably bumped them up by another win, and I'm not sure how much more play that would have got in Vegas, but it is fun to look at. So there's the DraftKings version. Texas OU the favorites in their final year of football in the Big 12. K-State 8.5. Then Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, a very interesting group at 7.5. And then UCF, Kansas, Oklahoma State. Who the heck knows there? 6.5. BYU at 6, and I think they'll be riding right on that. Iowa State 5.5. West Virginia, Houston, Cincinnati all grouped together at 4.5. And Cincinnati, one of those teams that Baylor will go play on the road, one of those road games you just never really know. There's a little something to chew on, like I said, and that's some fun offseason talk to be had there with that. So there's some win totals. Meanwhile, I saw the note earlier today that the RG3 camp is back. Did you see this? The RG3 Football Academy, Saturday, June 17th. Saw that advertisement from the Baylor Twitter account earlier this morning. I don't spend a lot of time on the app, so if they've been advertising that, I apologize. Have they been advertising that?
Not necessarily just that camp specifically, so that's new, but it's been on their summer camp schedule for a little bit. They've had that.
So most of you have not seen that.
What, 3 or 4 years now? I think they've had that running, so that's been really cool to see RG3 come back, obviously, for those camps. I think really cool.
It's a good deal. So the RG3 Football Academy will be taking place on Saturday, June the 17th. And you can go over to BaylorBears.com to find more information on all of their camps that are going on and how to sign up for the RG3 Academy. So for those who are interested in taking part in that, open to all positions, grades 9 through 12, 2-year, 4-year prospects as well, currently active in the NCAA transfer portal. So that's another little wrinkle to the whole thing there, which is very interesting. Wow. So, all positions, grades 9 through 12, 2-year and 4-year prospects currently active in the transfer portal, Saturday, June 17th. So go check out the website for more information there to go hang out with RG3. Meanwhile, one other basketball note I forgot, Jeremy Sohan had a pretty good year for your San Antonio Spurs and selected the All-NBA Rookie Second Team. So wanted to shout that out, meant to include that with the basketball notes, but that's a big deal, and the more NBA success some of these guys have, the better it is for Scott Drew and staff. So good to see that Jeremy is getting some accolades based on his rookie season with San Antonio.
Very happy for him, and they're about to get ready for the NBA lottery, in which they're going to try to make a run at Wemby. And so if they're able to get him, that would definitely help Sohan's ability to win a lot of games in the NBA if they're able to find kind of a future Hall of Fame type guy. And who knows, maybe Sohan becomes someone like that. But great to see him get this honor. He really turned it on after the All-Star break. Played a lot better the second half of the year. So proud of him. Hoping we get to see the two-handed free throw next year instead of the one-handed. But hey, he was making them. So that's great news to see. But yeah, I'm excited for him and how he develops. If he gets that jump shot going, I think he could really become something special in the NBA.
Very well could, but that's a nice start being all-NBA second team after his rookie season. So a good deal there. Meanwhile, speaking of all-everything awards, the XFL will play their championship game this weekend. Abram Smith will be taking part along with the DC Defenders, and he was named All-XFL. Led the league in rushing this season and now playing for a title. Along with some other familiar names, but just no Baylor guys. But, familiar names if you've been watching college football and following recruiting over the last year. But, yeah, they'll be playing for, I don't know, do you get a ring for the XFL championship? Certainly not one like the Super Bowl ring, but whatever you get.
I think they would have to give you something like that.
Yeah. I don't know if they get like the big ring, though. But he's playing for a ring, in at least on paper. And that would be very cool for him to cap off a big first year with a championship as well, but also Jordan Williams, former Baylor linebacker, named to the All-XFL second team, had a huge year for the San Antonio franchise with over 50 tackles. He was leading the XFL towards the end of March and ends up All-XFL second team, and we had him on the show just yesterday. He was very fun to listen to, very contagious personality, and so a couple of Baylor guys making their mark in the XFL this year, which is cool to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome, and good for Abram. A great chance for him to put on a show for the NFL this weekend. A great chance for him to just show what he's got, and I'm sure he's going to try to make an NFL team. I know y'all got to talk to him last week, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but I do hope he gets a shot at least to go to a training camp and maybe surprise some people after his kind of quick cut from the Saints after his rookie season. During his rookie season.
I mean, it's going to be hard being a running back, but if he was going to get a chance, you would think it would be coming off of something like this. And beyond that, the odds only shrink for, players with age and just wear and tear, but he had a big year, and so did Jordan Williams. Jordan Williams, just looking at it, nearly he finished with 89 tackles, 12 for loss, in just 10 games. So
it was awesome.
Pretty impressive stuff from Jordan Williams. Abram, equally impressive. I know they've started to sign some XFL guys, NFL teams have, but I don't know, with him being still active with one game to play, like what kind of conversations there may or may not have been just yet. But, yeah, you'd love to see him get a chance with the team to hang out over the summer and training camp and all that good stuff and just have an opportunity. So we will see as far as that goes. But first, he's got to go win a title. And then I guess one other note here before we get into the mailbag, a huge weekend for Baylor softball as they go in and sweep Texas. Top 5 sweep of the Longhorns, and did it in various ways. Had a run rule in game number 1, just plain a old win in game number 2, and then a walk-off in game number 3, and the full meal deal sweep of UT. That was pretty stunning. Not that they won the series, but the fact that they swept them, and they did it without Dariana Orm on the mound because they decided to give her rest, and she, for those that don't know, is like their all-everything pitcher. But they had some other great arms on the mound and just backup defense and offense, and all of it came together for what was a great weekend for Glenn Moore and company. With that sweep of UT, they are now the number 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament, and they will face number 5 seed Iowa State on Thursday at noon at the USA Hall of Fame softball complex in Oklahoma City. Now, the winner will go on to face Oklahoma in the very next round, so that would be tough, but win that first one and then worry about the rest of it later. OU gets a bye as the number 1 overall seed, and they are just a machine. I mean, they are truly the definition of that. When you talk about applying that tag to sports teams, they are a machine. So that would be tough but not impossible. Baylor beat them earlier this year.
Their only loss.
The only team to do that, and then they came back to get their revenge and smack Baylor around in 3 games here just about, a week or 2 ago. So they remembered that, and they got their payback for that. But, yeah, we could very well see a 5th game between those 2 teams, but you got to handle business against Iowa State, who's right behind you and that's not a gimme.
No, and that's a team that actually won the series against
they
Baylor.
did.
So that's definitely
And that was
something.
surprising, too.
Yeah, it was an upset for sure. So Baylor's got to worry about that one first. But yeah, beating Texas the way they did, they only gave up 4 runs in 3 games. That was spectacular to see. Just for those who don't know, Texas was the number 5 team in the country going into that matchup. In the first game in which Baylor run ruled them, it was actually in Austin. So yeah, that really weird series. They played 1 in Austin and then 2 in Waco for that one. So yeah, great series, huge for this team to get some momentum going into the postseason. Now they play Iowa State. That's another one where you need to continue to carry that momentum here. Beat Iowa State, get a win there, and then likely go and lose to Oklahoma. But again, losing to Oklahoma is not going to do much to your postseason outlook, but losing to Iowa State probably would. Because I still think they can probably get into that top 16 national seeding line, which is where you'd like to be.
Yeah.
You want to find a way to be in there. And I think RPI-wise, they're currently Baylor's 17. So, this game against Iowa State is actually pretty massive for them.
Yeah, it's a big deal, man. It's the postseason. The postseason starting. It's the Big 12 tournament. And, they're seeding and just, wanting to win the dang thing and, improve your standing and all of that. Get a win over Iowa State after they kind of beat you up. All that stuff's in play. So, yeah, that's getting underway on Thursday. Baylor versus Iowa State. Winner goes on to face Oklahoma, the top seed, with a first-round bye. So there's that. And anything as far as the rest of the spring sports go, I mentioned tennis. Both teams are out. The men will have, individuals. I didn't see on the women's side of things. I don't think they do based on what I last saw. But, tough year for tennis, I think, on both sides, especially the men. I know they had a hard schedule, but it's like they could never get over that hard schedule. It's just like it never improved. It just stayed kind of the same wavelength the entire season.
And they had injuries, guys.
Right. There's reasons why too, but
who weren't ruled ineligible. It's just really, like you said, disappointing.
Yeah.
And just it never came together for them. Like you said, it just like they played that tough schedule and then just could never get.
They just
past
played a tough
that.
schedule. That's all they did all year was just play a tough schedule and
then they played Florida State, a team they beat earlier this year, and they lose 4-0. And honestly, if you go look through those scores, it really, it was not very close. And losing the doubles point obviously gets things started in the wrong direction. So, yeah, they're out. The women's team at least won their first match.
They won their
SMU.
first rounder, beat the Mustangs, and then got swept by A&M. So
Which was expected.
Yeah, out in pretty quick fashion as well. So, yeah, both tennis teams are knocked out. You still got golf going on. At this point, women's golf is in the Pullman Regional. That's actually starting today, so we'll start to see some updates, or it started yesterday. Yeah. So we'll start to see further updates on that as we move along. Track still got outdoor championships for the Big 12. That'll be coming up this weekend. And men's golf starts next week with their regional. So all these things starting to kind of come to a close, or at least getting into the postseason. And then there's baseball, which we know they have about 2 weeks left, and then it's over this first year for Mitch Thompson as they just continue to kind of go on along, but certainly with a lot of struggles along the way. And they get their final Big 12 series this weekend against TCU. So TCU, not like some bulletproof, unbeatable team by any means. They're in the bottom half of the standings with Baylor, but certainly the Bears won't be the favorite in Fort Worth, mind you. So that'll get underway starting later on this week, and you can watch those games, I believe, on ESPN+. So there's at least that if you want to check out some Baylor baseball. But, their season, one more week after this one, and you'd think that'd be about it for them in year number one. Then get back to retooling and regrouping and doing what you can to get ready for 2024.
Yeah, and they can still make the Big 12 tournament. They're probably going to...
The problem is they've already played most of their games. Everybody else has got like another series after this weekend.
Well, KU is kind of right on. They have one less game. Right now.
KU does? Okay, well, everybody else has played 3 less games than Baylor.
Oh, yeah, so they're not going to catch anything higher than the last seed in the tournament.
For example, the reason why I say that is because TCU's got one more win, but TCU has 3 more games to play, and they play Baylor as well. So they got 6 to go, whereas Baylor's got 3. But, I wasn't thinking about Kansas, but so they're there as well.
Yeah, KU has, I guess, it says only 3 more on their schedule, but they've played 1 less game. So I don't know if they have a game out or whatever, but that also does not help Baylor because that means Baylor's going to have to win on the average and not necessarily the win total. So yeah, I don't know. Something to watch. Hopefully they can find a way to get into the Big 12 tournament. In order to do that, they're probably going to have to win this series that's what I have in my mind, at least, as far as if they can make the Big 12 tournament, it will come from a series win over TCU, which possible.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, but it has been a very tough year, so we will see how they close it on out. 2 weeks to go on just paper, and if there's anything extra, then that would be, a big deal that we'd be talking about next week if they could squeeze some more games out somehow. But, yeah, 2 weeks to go there. All right, so we basically wrapped around everything at this point, I believe. But returning and squaring back to football before we get into the mailbag here, anything recruiting-wise you want to update and kind of touch on there? Is there anything to touch on there? Where are we for the folks that want a little football news and notes on the recruiting front?
I mean, so I think the biggest thing is, Utah State cornerback Ajani Carter took his official visit to Baylor this weekend. All reports are it went really well. The thing that I think was big that Baylor's been doing is, they had Byron Vaughn's on campus by himself, essentially, and he committed. And then they had Trevin Maya on campus by himself, essentially. He committed. So there's this trend going on of Baylor getting transfers on campus essentially one at a time, and then they've been committing kind of shortly after that. Ajani took a visit to Indiana right before the Baylor visit, so it seems to be between those two schools, although this week Penn State and BYU offered as well. So kind of waiting to see if he's going to decide to take other visits. But last I heard from him, he told me he was going to make a decision in the next couple days, and that was on Sunday. So my belief is a decision should be coming this week unless something changes and he decides to take a visit to Penn State. I think my initial impression is that if he decides this week, I think Baylor's in a great position. If he waits and goes and takes visits elsewhere, then Baylor could be in a little bit of trouble. But that's kind of the biggest storyline right now as Baylor tries to round out their roster, tries to round out their transfer portal recruiting class, and just tries to fill some holes on this roster. And I do think this will likely be their last potential addition from the portal. If they don't land him, I do think they'll probably move in another direction and try to find another transfer before the season.
All right, so finally getting down to where there are really no spots left, and there's been so much roster activity really ever since the bowl game. I mean, the day of the bowl game, you were adding Dominic Richardson to the roster. Like it was, that was kind of the start of it. Was he the very first one, I guess, or was one of the Barrington brothers?
I was thinking Campbell, right?
Campbell might have been like a couple days before or something.
Maybe. They were kind of all right around.
Yeah, but that was December, and here we are, and it's May 9th, and they have been adding guys pretty much like every other week, it feels like, the entire stretch run. So, yeah, we're finally getting to where, hey, you only have 85 scholarships. That's really all you have to work with, and there hasn't been any attrition post-spring that we're aware of. I mean, has there been anybody? Everybody was in before spring ball. So, yeah, there's been no attrition there. And you'd think that there would have been at least a little bit since they wrapped up, 3 weeks ago now at this point. But there you have it. Just a one spot or so remaining for this team, and we'll see if that goes to their priority target. All right, I think that covers pretty much every base imaginable going on right now. We did have, I think, there was the one undrafted free agent, the straggler, Grant Miller. I don't know if we mentioned him last week, but he caught on with the Rams. Had that in an article. But outside of that, no new news on the NFL front after what was the NFL draft last weekend and a lot of activity for guys. But I don't know, it's close to just one draft pick, but like 6 or 7 guys caught on as undrafted free agents. So for what wasn't like a big sterling heralded class, that was a pretty good result, I feel like. But you got to, of course, have those guys stick and attach and stay around. That's the important part, not just signing the undrafted deal. So we'll see over these next few weeks and months how that goes for that whole crew of guys. All right, getting into the mailbag this week to wind it on down. Scotty B, the Baylor King. Who's saltier, Texas fans after multiple losses to Baylor or the In-N-Out Burger French fries?
Definitely Texas fans, because In-N-Out Burger French fries are not that salty.
I can't even recall what they taste like.
Yeah, they're not as salty as Whataburgers.
They're pretty legit.
They're
legit.
Good.
They're pretty legit.
They're good. They're not as good as Whataburgers. Whataburgers are my favorite. But Garrett might disagree with me, but Okay, but I will say the best French fries are still McDonald's. Those
I haven't been to
hit
McDonald's
different.
in a while. Like, if we're talking classic golden age McDonald's, and I would agree with you. But the last couple times I've been there, it's more of like soggy and cold.
The fries
At McDonald's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Depends on the location. There's like
Exactly
a couple
right.
of spots in Waco I trust. That's
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
But yeah, it's
Exactly.
definitely Texas fans compared to the In-N-Out fries. They were so even their their Twitter page was salty. Like their Texas softball Twitter page.
Oh, really?
They were posting graphics that made it look like they won the series. It was like the runs, they blurred out the run number and had it more hits and errors. I was like, come on, man. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's just stupid. That's what that is. I mean, just post the score. Who cares? Post the stupid score. I mean, move on and be an adult.
They were posting like it's a fair ball on one of the calls, and they were salty.
Well, I can't vouch for the In-N-Out Burger French fries. It's been a long time since I've been to In-N-Out Burger, but I'll take everybody else's word. May need to go do that here pretty soon. But yeah, it sounds like from the sounds of it that Texas fans were saltier. Anyways, future for men's tennis is bright. They should return everyone except 2 seniors. They do bring in 2 solid recruits, including a 6'8" player from South Africa who defeated a top 400 singles player in the world a few weeks ago.
Well, good to know because there's a lot of history with that men's tennis program, and I know this is not up to the standard what they did this year. So they need to retool. They need to add more talent, and so yeah, add in as much talent as you possibly can because they need to get better in doubles and singles going into next year.
Big Cheese 83, I assume this is more a question for Grayson, but has Baylor's recent misses at QB recruiting the last 2 years, especially Novosad, affected their reputation in recruiting any? And in your opinion, is this situation more bad luck and an unfortunate situation or a failure of the coaching staff? So I guess reputation and then, where do you place the blame, bad luck, unfortunate situation, or coaching staff?
Yeah, it definitely hasn't affected their reputation. I mean, misses happen all the time in college football, and I mean, high school recruiting is just an area where this stuff happens. So no, it has not affected their reputation at all. Like no QB recruit's going to be sitting there talking about, oh, remember when Zach Pyron decommitted? Like no one even talks about that at all. As far as the other part of your question, I would say that both situations fall more into bad luck, unfortunate situation category. Because Pyron obviously had some things to deal with, which led to his decommitment, and then eventually, Baylor kind of moved on from him. Austin Novosad, on the other hand, obviously super bad luck as he flipped literally on the last possible day you could after taking an official visit to Oregon. So I think in general, it's unfortunate bad luck situation. The only failure you could possibly have is maybe not having a backup plan. But I also think that it's ridiculous to have this argument that they should have had all these options available at the end, when in reality, like, that's not how this works. Guys commit to programs, then you get to the end of the cycle, and it's like, no, guys are still committed to the programs they've been committed to. So it's really hard to find a backup option that late. And you don't just want to take a guy just to take a guy. Like, you want to take a guy who can actually play. And if not, you go to the transfer portal, which is what they did with Sawyer Robertson and RJ Martinez.
Thank you, Big Cheese. Lomer, superfan, what are some potential swing games in the football season this year? Meaning the results of the game could have a drastic impact on the overall record perception of the season. I feel like the Utah and Texas games qualify. Win both, you could have a great year, but if you lose both, it could be an uphill battle the rest of the way. Well, I'll tell you, mine immediately goes to Utah in that week 2 game because you're really kind of setting the tone for what's going to be a favorable schedule, but a tough schedule nonetheless, with plenty of question marks all over it. So, yeah, I think that Utah game, just in all like the Pac and Big 12 stuff going on, like just bragging rights there, I think would be a big deal. Just to kind of, say like, hey, we beat a Pac-12 team, and they're, arguably their best team, one of their best teams. That would be big. And just to have a big non-con win like that early on in the season would be huge. To have a win like that at McLean would be huge. So, yeah, that's definitely a swing game. I understand why you point out Texas, but, like, to not answer your question exactly the way you phrased it, like, in terms of just importance, not necessarily swing games, TCU is number 1 without a freaking doubt in my mind. Like, you've got to freaking beat TCU. I mean, it's overdue. It's been long enough. Last year was just unimaginable how you found a way to lose to them again. And then what they went and did with it after, that game, just unreal. So to me, that TCU game has to be near the top. I'd say Tech is right there as well, just because I know Oklahoma and Texas, and they're on their way out. You don't play Oklahoma. Like, to beat Texas in your last meeting, I understand that would be a big deal. And that in Utah in the first month of the season, those are truly, you win those two games or 1-1 or whatever, that's a big deal. You go 0-2 and it's like, but yeah, I think, in terms of importance, that Utah game is huge. Texas is definitely a swing game, but the rest of the way, I think it'd be just massive to beat TCU for once and to beat Texas Tech as well. But your thoughts?
Yeah, perception-wise, I agree. The TCU game is the one, because that's fans' perception. That's a huge one. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it has been such a struggle for Baylor against TCU in recent years. So you said Utah. I agree. Like, winning that game kind of sets the course of the season really well in my eyes. Like, if you start 3-0, I find it really hard to believe they're not going to go at least 8-4. Like, I really do believe that. So I agree with you on that, but to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's week 3, Utah. I was saying week 2. It's week 3.
Week 2. It is week 2, right? Texas State, Utah, Long Island.
The schedule just jumped. Yeah, it's week 2. Sorry.
Yeah, week 2. So, but to be a little bit different, I'm going to go to actually their first road game of the year. This team has really struggled on the road. Even during their 2021 season, their 2 losses were on the road. And so I need to see them go on the road, play a team that I think is a bowl team. Like, I think Central Florida is a bowl team. Go to a place you haven't really been to much, and you're having to go. I don't know if they've ever been there, honestly, but having to go play there on the road, their first home game in the Big 12, your first road game of the year. And you have just played Utah and Texas, in the 3-week time span before that. You're about to play Tech in Waco the next week. I just think that game is so important for kind of the foundation they set this season and how the trajectory of their season goes. Because if you do start 2-2 or 3-1, if you lose that game, it really does take some shine off of a decent start to the season.
You could be like 2-3 at that point if you don't beat UCF. I mean, if you lose the Utah and Texas. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely one as well. And then you play, like you said, Tech that following week. And I'm thinking of Tech just in terms of, being in Waco and just like you're looking ahead. And I know you're looking ahead. K-State's going to be a team you're contending with all the time. And there's others as well. But like, we know the deal there. And like, that's a team that they're going to be super competitive with and is very similar to like TCU. But we know the history with TCU. They haven't been able to beat them for anything. You've had some success against Tech, and I think it's going to be huge to try and maintain that, especially like this. We'll know everything in the first 6 weeks of this season.
Yeah, once we get through the Tech game, we'll know.
We'll know where they're going, all that stuff. They'll have played Tech, they'll have played Texas, they'll have been to UCF, they'll have played Utah. I mean, we'll have a great grip on where they are by the time that Texas Tech game ends and they head into the bye week, because that's the game before the bye week, and then after that, we'll be saying, okay, they need 4 wins to make a bowl game, or they need 3 or whatever. But yeah, that first half of the schedule, there's Utah, Texas at UCF, Texas Tech at home. Huge games.
If they're 4-2, they're a legitimate Big 12 contender.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it.
Easier said than done.
If they're 4-2 during that stretch, they are, because their next 3 games are like, if you start 4-2, their next 3 games, they should win all 3. And then you get into what is a tough November. But in my eyes, if you start 4-2, you're a legitimate Big 12 contender this year. And so that's why those first few games we've talked about, pretty much all of them up to this point, because they are such big swing games. And it's interesting because in the past, we kind of looked at those Iowa State games, remember, that were kind of the first conference game of the year and how important those were. This year, it would be Texas, technically, if we were going off of that same mindset. But yeah, I think we went through some of the bigger ones. But you're right, TCU perception-wise, that's a huge one.
Well, nothing matters in the second half right now.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing matters, because if they don't get out of the first half, fine, then doesn't matter. And if they do, then then we start looking at that second half and going, wow, like, look at this Iowa State game or this whoever. But yeah, it's all in that first half of the season, those swing games, and there's 3 of them, at least. So thank you, Lomers. It's going to be a fun little stretch, hopefully. Fun stretch, but tough stretch. Bears 224. If our quarterback play doesn't show anything this year, we don't recruit well for 24. Do you see Sean Bell still here? I like him as a person. We just haven't seen anything great as far as quarterback play yet. Bohannon was great, but as a runner, but nothing as great as something specific as quarterback play.
I think that Sean Bell, in my eyes, should at least be at Baylor and be coaching at Baylor until he gets his quote-unquote actual guys as the starting quarterback, which his first quarterback recruit is actually Sawyer Robertson, because Kyron Drones obviously isn't here right now. So Sawyer is kind of that guy that I'm looking at and going, okay, this is more of exactly what Sean Bell recruited, right? Because Blake Shapen was technically a Larry Fedora recruit. And then you look at, Blake. So, yeah, I mean, that's the only one that he's had. And so I think that that's the bigger thing. I don't think Sean is at risk of losing his job this year. I think in general, if you saw what he did with Gary Bohannon, I mean, guys, to think that Gary Bohannon could, lead a team to a Big 12 championship is pretty absurd. If you look at what he's done outside of his time at Baylor as the quarterback, I mean, he has not been good at all. And so he was able to turn him into a guy that could actually move an offense and win a Big 12 championship. That is a crazy cool accomplishment. And so now, it's about continuing to get better, developing Blake Shapen, allowing Sawyer Robertson to battle with him and figuring out who gives you the best chance to win. But right now, after that 2021 season and still riding off of that and trying to, just get better at the position, develop young guys at the quarterback position, I really do think his job is fine right now.
Yeah, I don't sense any heat or warming up right now. I think if, the season doesn't go very well, then that's a different story, and that's basically what you were asking. So, yeah, that's something we need to see play out. Need to see who they sign. And, I understand the frustrations with just the recruiting part of things, but that's also, you can't solely blame somebody for what happened with Austin Novosad. Like, if you do everything you could possibly do and somebody then there still decides to go against what you've done, like, that's not necessarily your fault. Yeah. Austin Novosad wasn't Sean Bell's fault. That was Oregon and a connection there with their coach they had just hired from UTSA and probably some NIL.
Definitely some NIL.
Yeah, and all of that coming into play. That's not – Sean Bell took him 2 hours before he was supposed to sign, and the kid decided to pull the rug out from underneath him. That's on Austin Novosad. That's not on Sean Bell. And I'm not even trying to disparage the kid. I'm just trying to say that's not Sean's fault.
And then he won a recruiting battle against the defending national runner-ups for Sawyer Robertson.
Yeah, but
so just keep that in mind.
As far as on the field play goes, I mean, that's as much on Shapen, I think, as it is on Bell. But it's a combination, so we'll see.
Grimes.
And Grimes. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I don't sense that right now. But it all depends on how a lot of things go here moving forward. Osos Del Rio Brazos will close us out. What would be your way too early prediction for the number of Bears drafted in the 2024 NFL draft?
It's so tough after what we just saw this year. I think, Baylor's going to need to win a lot of games if they want a bunch of guys drafted. But my initial thoughts, I think Clark Barrington, TJ Franklin, Gabe Hall, and I think that's probably as far as I'm willing to go currently. It's so hard to get drafted. I don't think people understand that. Like, it is so difficult to be one of the guys that are actually selected. So those three make a lot of sense. Some outside chance guys, maybe a Drake Dabney, maybe a Dominic Richardson, Byron Vaughns, I think the transfer from Utah State, I think he'll get drafted probably. So I'd add him to my list as well. But that's kind of where I'm at.
No Matt Jones, no.
I don't see it. Mike Smith, they need to show me a lot this year for me to say, yeah, they're going to for sure get drafted. It's hard. Like, Connor Galvin didn't get drafted. Connor Galvin was the best offensive lineman in the league in 2021. Like, it's difficult.
Yeah, I would say 2 on the number of Bears drafted. It's hard because there's like 7th-year seniors, 6th-year seniors, 5th-year seniors, 4th-year seniors. There's transfer. I mean, it's like you go look at the roster and you used to just hit sort, and it would be like 5 categories. It'd be your redshirt seniors and then your seniors, juniors, whatever. But you could at least see. Now there's a 7 next to guys' names like Bryson Jackson. There's 6s next to guys' names because of the COVID years. And so I'm just like sorting through the eligibility. But yeah, I mean, just who all's eligible. I'd say a couple of guys that I'd feel good about. And I'm not even getting specific on like who necessarily, but like, yeah, TJ Franklin. Who else did you say?
Gabe Hall.
Like Gabe Hall, like those guys make sense. But You know what? Outside of that, no, I don't feel like there's any just automatic, like, yeah, go ahead and pencil in 4 or 5 guys for next year. I don't. A lot will depend on how they perform this season. And that goes for your Matt Joneses and your Garmin Randolphs.
Garmin Randolph.
All these guys, yeah.
Drake Dabney.
I mean, you'd feel good about his chances, a 6'5", 200-plus pound pass-catching tight end, but he's also coming off of a bad injury, so
it's crazy because, I mean, yeah, you would think his measurables are better. He's more athletic than Ben Sims, but Ben Sims is the most productive Baylor tight end of all time, and he couldn't even get drafted.
Right.
It's pretty crazy.
Easier said than done. A lot of people have tight ends. A lot of people have, your D linemen that are just as good. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and say 2. So it'd be better than this year's just 1 with Siaki Ika. But, I wouldn't place a large wager on that, put it that way. But then again, they have a good enough year, and you could see 5 or so guys that find their way. It just depends quite a bit on what happens over these next few months. Early. And there's that as well. So thank you for the question, and we'll have plenty to talk about in that regard as the season winds on along and you start to get a clear picture of kind of where guys stand in the eyes of scouts. But thank you for that. And to everybody who asked a question this week, that'll about cover, I think, every base imaginable right now. But Grayson, anything before we go here?
No, just be sure to check out the Sikkim 365 premium side. Got all kinds of content, news, notes, recruiting. We're about to get into June, which is when official visits happen. So you're definitely going to want to pay attention then. And then, of course, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, 365 Sports Radio with Craig, Paul, and Smokey. A lot of fun talking college football as spring ball's wrapped up for everyone now, and it's the off season.
Yeah, it is. It is the off season, so we will be talking about win totals and things like that probably on a more regular basis, but there's been no shortage of college athletics news, that's for sure, and still got baseball, softball, all these other sports winding through, but for now, that'll about do it. Thanks to Garrett Ross, as always, behind the scenes, Jack McKenzie as well, and thanks to you for listening. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe on the Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 page, which you're believe watching right this very second. So if you haven't done that, we'd appreciate it. And until next time, it's been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.